Hello everybody, this is Cholera bringing you my commentary of Game 3, the final game between Nada and Fantasy, here in the Incruit OSL Round 36. Both players must be exhausted after Game 2. Game 2 lasting 46 minutes. Game 1 was pretty short, though, only 10 minutes. And these kind of long marathon StarCraft games really test players' endurance. And this is why, partially why pro gamers are required to work out an hour a day. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but every pro team definitely has required gym attendance for its pro gamers. They have to, lift weights, do some cardio, or play sports every day. Definitely, they have to keep in relatively good shape. I mean, obviously there are some, some, or at least one rather impressively sized golden mouse recipient, I'll just say. But otherwise, most of the programmers I think are in very good shape, and even July, of course, is definitely in shape enough to play a long StarCraft game. Anyway, here we have Fantasy in teal at the 11 o'clock position, Nada in purple at the 7 o'clock location. And this map is Andromeda, much more standard map, I think, than Return of the King last game, which brought some interesting Terran versus Terran play. The only disappointing part of it, and it wasn't that disappointing, to be honest. I didn't want to, overly criticize the players, but it was just how long the game took to finish at the end. We'll see if this game ends up being as much of a macro fest as last game was, or if either player decides to go for some kind of one-base rush strategy. Although Andromeda, that's perhaps a little bit rare, because it is such a favoring, it's another map that favors macro very much. Both players putting up their supply depots inside their base. And one thing I should have wondered out loud in last game was something I always talk about with my kid brother, once again, other people who play StarCraft, and that's, what does it feel like to have one hit point? Like, is it right before you die? I mean, how do these people function? How do units function, or how do people function with just one hit point? It's very strange. I just can't imagine what it feels like. Anyway, Nada going for gas first here before the barracks. I'm not sure exactly what that signals. I think it just, perhaps it does signal a two-factory push here. He wants to get that early gas out, so he goes for that he needs to get a lot of gas for a two-factory push to get the tanks out, rather. And Fantasy could be in big trouble. Fantasy going for a 14 command center here, so the roles are reversed. Last game, Nada was the one who went for 14 command center. No, yes, 14 command center from Fantasy. Fantasy going to float the command center, interesting enough. I think maybe he's going to try denying a scout from Nada by placing maybe 2 SCVs on the ramp, but we'll see if he does it on time. Nada getting the early gas down, so I think this is definitely indicative of a rush build. So yeah, I'm wondering what it feels like to be a Marine with one hit point. Like, if you trip and you fall, you die. Does it mean you're, like, profusely bleeding? Or is death in StarCraft not really death, but, like, just being incapacitated, like, too weak to fight anymore? Like, if you have, like, 0 hit points, you don't actually die, you just fall down. You're like, oh, man, I can't fight anymore. So I don't know. I don't know what it really means. Let me guys... tell me what you guys think what does it mean for a unit or a person, to have one hit point. Nada going for that early factory, like I said, and Fantasy could have a lot of problems holding off what's most likely a rush build from Nada. Nada's going to get the scout in, I think, unless Fantasy has something on his ramp, and I don't think he has anything on his ramp. And Nada will get in, see the command center building. He's going to need a counter for it. He's going to make a counter, I think, immediately. And Nada has that lucky scout now. Gonna spot this. Yes, he's going to spot the factory. I'm sorry, the barracks just now going up, and the command center just now finishing. So Fantasy needs to throw that factory up immediately, and we'll probably see a second factory, although on this map it's possible to see a starport also, given that the ramp is slightly easier to hold than most maps. And here we're going to see a starport. Yep. So we'll see what choice Nada decides to take. Nada, I think, actually is going for a dropship play here because he's put down that machine shop. I think he's going for dropships, early dropships, to try to siege the natural expansion. And that is something you can do on Andromeda. You do have that ledge overlooking your natural expansion, quite like Othello, or if you want to go old school, quite like Lost Temple. And this is why Terran versus Terran is very favored on Othello and pretty favored on Andromeda, as in that teams generally send in Terran players. Here comes the SCV trying to get into Nada's base. Nada, good job there, holding his ramp. If that SCV got in, that might have been quite disastrous for Nada, because I think Fantasy probably would have at least built a supply depot or something overlooking the natural expansion or something to try to guard himself against this. And now Nada has a control tower down, so he is going to be getting that dropship out very soon, way before Fantasy has anything to defend against it. We'll see if Nada decides to send in an SCV also and try to build like a bunker there. We have seen him do that against a Zerg player actually, build a bunker next to his tank so that other dropships would find it hard to take out that that tank. Or actually not dropships, but in that case that was Mutalisks. But anyway. Looks like Nada doing some posturing with that early tank, maybe trying to let Fantasy think he's going to be going for an expansion, or maybe just trying to deny Fantasy from scouting. Looks like Fantasy might get in, though, with this SCV. That'll be disastrous for Nada. Nada needs to be careful and not let this SCV in. Looks like he's got another tank in, but what Fantasy has spotted is the fact that Nada has not put up a command center yet, so he knows Nada is going for some kind of tech rush here, some kind of technical rush. He's going to be a little more alert. Of course, he has to be vigilant, obviously. Every Terran player who's half decent is going to know that there's some kind of reaction coming from Nada, either a fast expand of his own or a tech rush. And of course, he is quite vigilant right now, but he's going to be extra vigilant knowing that there's going to be a tech rush coming for sure. Nada with 2 Marines pushing up and could be just trying to provide some cover, trying to scout a little bit. Here comes the drop from Nada, and he's going to be on top of that natural expansion way before Fantasy can get there. By the way, there are those neutral buildings on Andromeda separating the main base from the natural, from the ledge overlooking the natural, rather. And Nada's going to have the advantage of a ground, but not of sight, actually. Fantasy has put his barracks up, and actually Fantasy microing his tanks better than Nada did. That's really bad by Nada. Somehow losing one of his tanks there, and not taking down any of Fantasy's tanks. And oh no, he's going to lose his dropship. Fantasy has gone for rates before I had a chance to see it. And Nada could be in a bit of trouble here. He's gone for the expansion, of course, much slower. Oh, but Nada, smart move there, Nada, going for cloak rates. I did not see that coming. Sorry about that. He has cloak rates going up, and that's going to help him pick off these tanks and help him get a position overlooking that natural. Bunker burns down for Fantasy also. I don't think Fantasy is expecting cloak rates and dropships. I think he was expecting just dropships, so I don't see any scanners going up for him. Nada's expansion, meanwhile, taking a while to go up, but I think Nada is not going to be very far economically behind. Academy trying to be thrown up for Fantasy. Meanwhile, though, Fantasy has cloak rates of his own, and he might be going for an attack on Nada pretty soon. Nada trying to pick off that SCV, building the academy, but Nada needs to defend his main base now. I think Nada might suspect that the force has moved out for Fantasy. 3 tanks and 3 Marines, and Nada only has 2 tanks to defend there. Once again, I have to say, good micro by Fantasy, and a little bit poor micro by Nada to lose those 2 tanks to, while, you know, Fantasy walked into the tanks, sieged up, and still managed to win that 2-on-2 tank battle. I'm actually surprised by that. I think he just focused fire on one of Nada's tanks, and Nada didn't do the same. Anyway, Fantasy now moving south with his barracks too. He's going to try to get vision with that barracks, and it's going to help him try to siege Nada's natural expansion. Looks like Nada's getting his... No, this is Fantasy's base. Fantasy throwing up his comsat station, so he's going to be able to detect. Nada already has his comsat station up. So both players need to be careful with their rates. Fantasy with 1 wraith coming down, Nada with 2 wraiths coming down, trying to pick off these tanks in the middle of the map. Fantasy with 1 cloak wraith. Nada can take out this wraith, though. He needs to go and take it out. Yeah, nice work there by Nada. I'm sorry, I am biased towards Nada, but what can I say? I'm a Nada fanboy, and so I am biased. You know, some viewers say that it's a bad thing. I mean, honestly, you know, I think it's honest to say the bias and then to report the game as much as possible. And I do think that I'm not criticizing Fantasy for his play excessively in this game, at least. He certainly has been playing quite well in this series, and so has Nada. I just prefer Nada to win. But anyway, Nada is doing some nice damage here with his raids. It seems that Fantasy is temporarily out of rates, and he's transferring tech now to Goliaths. I guess he's realizing he doesn't have enough to win the air battle, or is choosing not to go for the air battle. Nada, meanwhile, pushing out with a couple of tanks. He has them more clumped together, though, so splash damage is going to harm them a little more, but I think he's going to be able to, well, if he inches up a little bit, he's going to be able to be in range of that 1 tank of Fantasy's, and he's going to pick it off. Looks like Nada actually choosing to retire